So we've reached a point in the history of our species where science is able to tell us in an empirical, factual way that there is no homunculus in here. There is no controller, no central mental substance or egoic entity which is our essence and that is able to, through the body, express its will. However, I think we falsely assume that that scientific perspective is totalizing, that it describes all of reality, when I think reality is something which is always beyond what we can grasp. Um, and, there are multiple perspectives to pursue reality to begin with. There is this subjective view of the universe as a collection of matter. We can look at the brain from the outside and see that it is an intricate network of cells that learn from their environment and, in a sense, are determined by that environment and by their genetic history. But there is also this other perspective, this subjective perspective of our phenomenal experience, of what it's like to be somebody. And I don't think we are ever going to be able to reduce the one to the other. We can't transcend ourselves objectively. We will always remain existing beings with this subjective perspective that do science and that come to have, in some vague way, objective knowledge. And I'm using these terms, in a very open, wishy-washy kind of way. In the strongest sense, I don't think objective knowledge is possible because we are subjective creatures. And it's sort of like the same relationship I perceive between free will and determinism. You can't have one without the other. If we just had a physical reality, what's determined? Unless there is this subjective awareness of being where it seems like we are free, determinism has no meaning. There's no reason to call the physical universe itself determined if there are no subjective entities existing in at least an apparent free sense. There's no justification for calling the physical world determined. We call it determined because from the phenomenal side of our inner subjective experience, we look at science and we assume that science is the be-all and end-all of the human pursuit of knowledge. And if science says the brain is a physically determined process, then we are compelled to agree because the specialists have said that that's the way it is. The problem, I think, is, there are so many angles to pursue this question of what is reality. Science itself is a field full of specialists. And I don't remember the quote exactly, but Viktor Frankl, a psychoanalyst from the 20th century, said something along the lines that it's not that science itself is bad, or that specialization itself is bad. It's that specialists are trying to generalize. It's that neuroscientists who study the inner workings of the brain are trying to generalize that specialized knowledge into a coherent truth about reality itself, in the grandest sense that you can conceive of the word. Because I think a lot of your thinking, Nick, comes from this perspective of cognitive science and consciousness being what the brain does, and what the brain does being what we are aware of. And so in a sense it's this weird combination of materialism and idealism, because I think you'll admit that we are aware. You are aware of your experience. But I think you're saying that awareness is limited to what this brain can perceive. And when you brought up the question of time in your last video, the question is really, does time exist objectively out there in the world, or is it a quality of perception that arises because of experience? Is it something that, in a sense, is part of the process that goes on in here, rather than part of the process which goes on everywhere? And, you know, it's impossible for us to say, and I don't really know. But it sort of leaves us in this in-between space where we can't really say what reality is. Is reality a collection of objects? Is it all material? Or is reality this, you know, idealistic, dreamlike cosmos where everything is an appearance and nothing has any substance or weight? We're sort of stuck in between those two polarities, and it's impossible, for me at least, to fall onto one or the other, because like so many of these dualisms, they only make sense in relationship to one another. And if there could be a synthesis, it's not a synthesis that we could ever, you know, rationally describe or hold in our hands and you know, communicate explicitly about, because it is the underlying wholeness of reality itself. It's what allows this all to take place. And if we could understand what allows there to be this you know, it seems this impossible to leap gap between my first-person experience and the third-person observations of science. It doesn't seem as, it seems as though that is what is necessary for there to be experience at all. If I could know everything objectively, there's no longer any room for any experience at all. There's just objects. But on the other hand, if it's all just experience, then what am I experiencing? What is experience of? And so we're trying to think ourselves out of the position we already find ourselves in, and we can't do it. We can't do it.